American theater of the worldwide 7 Years' War. The war was fought between the colonies of British America and New France, with both sides supported by military units from their parent countries of Great Britain and France, as well as Native American allies. At the start of the war, the French North American colonies had a population of roughly 60,000 compared to 2 million in the English North American colonies. The outnumbered French particularly depended on the Indians. Long in conflict, the metropole nations declared war on each other in 1756, escalating the war from a regional affair into an international conflict. The name French and Indian War is used mainly in the United States and in English-speaking Canada, and refers to the two main enemies of the British colonists, the Royal French forces and the various indigenous forces allied with them. British and European historians use the term the 7 Years' War, as do many Canadians. French Canadians call it la guerre de la conquête. The war was fought primarily along the frontiers between New France and the British colonies, from Virginia in the south to Nova Scotia in the north. It began with a dispute over control of the confluence of the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers, called the Forks of the Ohio, and the site of the French Fort Duquesne in present-day Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The dispute erupted into violence in the Battle of Umonva Glen in May 1754, during which Virginia militiamen under the command of 22-year-old George Washington ambushed a French patrol. In 1755, 6 colonial governors in North America met with General Edward Braddock, the newly arrived British Army commander, and planned a 4-way attack on the French. None succeeded, and the main effort by Braddock was a disaster. He was defeated in the Battle of the Monongahela on July 9, 1755, and died a few days later. British operations in 1755, 1756 and 1757 in the frontier areas of Pennsylvania and New York all failed, due to a combination of poor management, internal divisions, and effective Canadian, French regular forces, and Indian offense. In 1755, the British captured Fort Beausejour on the border separating Nova Scotia from Acadia. Soon afterward they ordered the expulsion of the Acadians. Orders for the deportation were given by William Shirley, Commander-in-Chief, North America, without direction from Great Britain in arms and those who had sworn.
The Acadians, that's the name of a car, right, from GMC. Just like Lex will always points out, they name their vehicles after those that they have conquered, right?
A loyalty oath to His Britannic Majesty, were expelled. Native Americans were likewise driven off their land to make way for settlers from New England. After the disastrous 1757 British campaigns, the British government fell. William Pitt came to power and significantly increased British military resources in the colonies at a time when France was unwilling to risk large convoys to aid the limited forces it had in New France. France concentrated its forces against Prussia and its allies in the European theatre of the war. Between 1758 and 1760.
And this is what I think about every time they mention the whole world's a stage, or the whole world's a play. That scene from Clash of the Titans, where, as you can see down here, it's supposed to be like the little armies, right? At their feet. You see like everything's supposed to be made out. I think about that every time I hear that from this scene, from this movie.
And Pensacola. At the start of the war, no French regular army troops were stationed in North America, and few British troops. New France was defended by about 3,000 troops de la Marine, companies of colonial regulars. The colonial government recruited militia support when needed. Most British colonies mustered local militia companies, generally ill-trained and available only for short periods, to deal with native threats, but did not have any standing forces. Because of its large frontier, Virginia had several companies of British regulars. The colonial governments were used to operating independently of each other, and of the government in London, a situation that complicated negotiations with native tribes. Their territories often encompassed land claimed by multiple colonies. After the war began, the leaders of the British Army establishment tried to impose constraints and demands on the colonial administrations. Events leading to war, Car Copyright Laurens expedition, in June 1747, concerned about the incursion and expanding influence of British traders such as George Croghan in the Ohio country, Roland Michel Baron de la Glisonnière, the Governor-General of New France, ordered Pierre-Joseph Car Copyright Lauren to lead a military expedition through the area. Its objectives were to confirm the original French claim to the territory, determine the level of British influence, and impress the Indians with a French show of force. Car Copyright Lauren's expedition force consisted of about 200 troops de la Marine and 30 Indians. The expedition covered about 3,000 miles between June and November 1749. It went up the St. Lawrence, continued along the northern shore of Lake Ontario, crossed the portage at Niagara, and followed the southern shore of Lake Erie. At the Chautauqua portage, the expedition moved inland to the Allegheny River, which it followed to the site of present-day Pittsburgh. Their Car Copyright Lauren buried lead plates engraved with the French claim to the Ohio country. Whenever he encountered British merchants or fur traders, Car Copyright Lauren informed them of the French claims on the territory and told them to leave. When Car Copyright Lauren's expedition arrived at Logstown, the Native Americans in the area informed Car Copyright Lauren that they owned the Ohio country and that they would trade with the British regardless of the French. Car Copyright Lauren continued south until his expedition reached the confluence of the Ohio and the Miami rivers, which lay just south of the village of Pickquillanny, the home of the Miami chief known as Old Briton.
And that's what caught my ear. I'm like, whoa, never heard of Old Briton.
Copyright Lauren threatened Old Briton with severe consequences if he continued to trade with the British. Old Briton ignored the warning. Disappointed, Car Copyright Lauren returned to Montreal in November 1749. In his extensively detailed report, Car Copyright Lauren wrote, "All I can say is that the natives of these localities are very badly disposed towards the French, and are entirely devoted to the English. I don't know in what way they could be brought back." Even before his return to Montreal, reports on the situation in the Ohio country were making their way to London and Paris, each side proposing that action be taken. William Shirley, the expansionist governor of the province of Massachusetts Bay, was particularly forceful, stating that British colonists would not be safe as long as the French were present. Conflicts between
Memeskia in Miami, Illinois. Memeskia, Dragonfly, 1695, June 21, 1752. Known as Old Briton by the British and as the Demoiselle by the French, was an 18th century Piankashaw chieftain who in November 1750, he signed a friendship treaty with the British Indian agent, George Croghan. 1, which was cemented during a visit by Indian scout Christopher Gist in February 1751. 2.
Check this out. Now his name there. Oh, no, that's not what I'm looking for. His name in French. Now, I'm not good at French, so if anyone else is, you gotta tell me if they translate this correctly, because that's insulting.
Lady.
But the English called him Old Briton. That's interesting. A lot of this here is just the same that was on that video back there. So